Hi everyone, and you're very welcome to today's Saturday session, which is going to be focused on Leaving Cert biology with me, Conor, and our topic for today is going to be photosynthesis. So, as we know, photosynthesis is one of those topics. There's generally an exam question on it every single year. It can pop up as one of the short questions, it can pop up as an experiment question because there is an experiment in photosynthesis, and more often than not, it is there as one of our long questions as well. So we're going to have a look through it today. Throughout, we're going to have a look at the notes around the background of the photosynthesis, and we're going to practice some exam questions towards the end as well, just so we can summarise everything that we've come across and show how we can pick up as many marks as possible in the final exam. So to start off with, we're just going to talk a little bit about what photosynthesis is, and then we're going to look at the more ins and outs of the complex process that it can be. So photosynthesis is the process by which green plants produce food, generally glucose and oxygen. Now, we know that plants are autotrophs, and that's any organism that makes their own food. So this is slightly different from us because we're a heterotroph, hetero meaning different. That's any organism that gets their food from other sources. So plants make their own food, they're autotrophs, and how they do this is they convert light energy, which is coming from the sun, into chemical energy, which is going to be their food source. And this all takes place within the chloroplast. So we're going to see in a couple of minutes about how the chloroplast, specifically the chlorophyll, the green dye that exists inside the chloroplast, is what's responsible for absorbing that sunlight so that that sunlight can be used to convert it into chemical energy, which is going to be the food source for the plants. Now, for photosynthesis to happen, there's 4 requirements. There needs to be light, there needs to be chlorophyll, which is the green dye. We'll come to that in a minute. We need a water supply, and we also need carbon dioxide as well. So the first requirement that we have is light. So the light, this comes from the sun. The sun is the primary energy source. And that sunlight is going to be trapped by the chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll inside the chloroplast. So the chlorophyll, that's the green dye inside the chloroplast, that's what traps the sunlight. So if you can remember back to when you were a kid, if you were playing on the grass and you went sliding along it and you got grass stains all along your knees or your shorts or your trousers that you might have been wearing, that's the chlorophyll, okay, the green dye that exists inside the chloroplast. We also need a water supply there as well. So that water supply is going to enter the roots and it's going to travel to the leaves through the xylem vessels. Okay, so the xylem is responsible for transporting that water coming from the roots. And then carbon dioxide as well, this is going to come from the air. Could be from us exhaling it and also from other factors there as well. But the carbon dioxide is coming from the air and it's going to enter through the stomata. And the stomata, just as a quick recap there, they're the tiny holes on the underside of the leaf. Okay, so that's the 4 requirements that we have for photosynthesis: light, chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, and water. So the process of photosynthesis, we're going to look in 2 different ways. We're going to look at the word equation for photosynthesis, and then we're going to translate that across into the scientific equation or the mathematical equation for photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, we need our carbon dioxide, which was one of the requirements. We also need our water, the sunlight, which is going to be trapped by the chlorophyll, is going to be converted into our food source, which is going to be glucose, and also some oxygen there as well. And that oxygen is going to be vitally important for us as humans. Okay, so this is our word equation. We have our carbon dioxide, our water, our sunlight, and our chlorophyll. There are 4 requirements. It's going to be converted into glucose and oxygen. Okay, if we want to look at a balanced chemical equation here, we look at the balancing bit in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to focus here on the actual chemical formulae for each of this. Carbon dioxide is CO2. Water is H2O. We still have our sunlight being absorbed by our chlorophyll. We have our glucose, which is C6H12O6. And we also have our oxygen, which is O2. Now, anyone who studies chemistry will know that this has to be a balanced chemical equation. So we have to have the same amount of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens on the left-hand side as we do on the right-hand side. And we can see straight away that this is not the case, because over on the right-hand side here, we have 6 carbons. Over here, we only have 1. Over here on the left-hand side, we have 2 oxygens there and an additional oxygen there, which is 3. Over here we have 6 plus another 2, which is 8. Okay, so this needs to be balanced. So in order to get our 6 carbons, if I add a 6 over here at the start of CO2, we can now see that we have 6 carbon dioxide molecules here. So we have 6 carbons here, we have 6 carbons over here. Okay, but we do run into a little bit of an issue here because we have 6 O2s as part of this, which is going to give me 12, plus another one is 13. Over here we have 6 and another 2, which is 8. So it's not going to be balanced in this case either. Okay, so one thing I'm going to look at here is the hydrogens. We have 12 of them here. We've only got 2 of them over here. So if I add a 6 here before the H2Os, we're now going to have 6 waters. So we're going to have 6 sets of H2s, which gives us 12 hydrogens. We again have 12 hydrogens over here. So we're nearly there. Our carbons are balanced because we have 6. Our hydrogens are balanced because we have 12 there in total. We have 12 there. It's just the oxygens that are left. So let's just double check again. We've 6 O2s, which has given us 12 oxygens. We've 6 O's there, which is going to give me a total of 18. We have 6 there, and we have another 2 there, which is 8. Okay, we need another 10. Now, if I was to add a 6 in front of the O2 over here at the side, instead of having 1 O2, we now have 6. That's an additional 5 O2s. In total, that's an additional 10 oxygens. So that should be our balanced chemical equation there. So 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O. Sunlight is going to be absorbed by chlorophyll. We've C6H12O6, which is glucose, and 6 O2s. And when you balance that up now, we can see we have the exact same number on both sides. Okay, you don't have to go through the ins and outs of explaining how that was balanced. You can just learn that off, but it is important to know the balanced chemical equation and the word equation there as well, because both of those could be asked in the final exam. Now, what is the role of photosynthesis? Well, plants use it to make their own food, so it's vitally important for plants. Not so important in terms of us for our food, because we get our food from other sources. We don't need photosynthesis to make our food, but photosynthesis is equally important for animals because plants, through photosynthesis, are going to produce oxygen, which we need to release energy from food. Okay, so it is important for us there as well. Photosynthesis is also responsible for forming fossil fuels and also responsible for removing carbon dioxide from the air. Because if you remember, carbon dioxide is one of the requirements, one of the 4 requirements for photosynthesis, which is vitally important for us as well, reducing the carbon levels that exist in the air. Now, for the stages of photosynthesis, we're going to look at the 5 stages in their simplified versions first of all, and then we're going to look at the stages more complex as well. Okay, but the 5 stages of photosynthesis can be broken down as follows. The first one, remember, it's all about the sunlight being absorbed by the plant to make food. Okay, so it's going to start off with the sunlight being trapped and it's going to finish with the food being formed. And there's a couple of steps in the middle then that we have to look at there as well. So very first thing that has to happen, the light has to be absorbed. The very last thing that's going to happen is the food source is going to be formed, which is glucose in this case, which is C6H12O6. So the couple of steps in the middle that we have to look at there is water is going to be split. We'll look at that in a couple of minutes about what that entails. We're going to get products formed and we're going to have that light energizes electrons. Okay, so the light is going to be absorbed, water is going to be split, some products are going to be produced, light is going to energize electrons, and then glucose is going to be formed. And we look at each one of these stages in a little bit more detail in the next couple of minutes, and then in its very detailed steps at the end. Now, light is going to be absorbed. So we've mentioned already about how chlorophyll is the green dye that exists inside the chloroplasts. All of this is taken part in the chloroplast. So chlorophyll is going to trap the light, and this light energy is going to provide energy for the entire process to form. And we can see that down in the diagram here. So we have all our chlorophyll pigments here. The light energy is going to be absorbed by the chlorophyll, and all of that energy absorbed is going to be used to fuel the rest of the steps. So light absorbed by the chlorophyll. The next stage here is that water is going to be split. Now, again, this is happening inside the chloroplast, okay? We know that water is going to be H2O, and that trapped light energy is going to split that H2O up into its individual components. So if we can imagine here that we have 2 water molecules, 2 H2Os, all right? In total there, if we have 2 H2Os, we're going to have 4 hydrogens because we're going to have 2 sets of H2, so 4 hydrogens, and we're also going to have 2 oxygens, okay? So straight away here, if we split those up, we're going to have 4 hydrogens. Hydrogens are going to be positive, also known as protons. I'll just write that down. We're also going to have our 2 oxygens, O2 gas, Okay, that's coming from over here. 4 hydrogens, 2 oxygens, and we're also going to have 4 electrons. Okay, now where are the electrons coming into this at all? How are we after getting electrons from that if we only had H and O in H2O? Well, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of this, but if you can remember back to junior cycle when you were looking at science and looked at the periodic table, you would remember that oxygen had an atomic number of 8 and a mass number of 16. So if you were drawing the Bohr configuration of oxygen, right here in the center, we would have had our protons and neutrons, and then on the rings, we would have had our electrons. Okay, so each oxygen had 8 electrons. Hydrogen, it was the first element in the periodic table. Hydrogen had 1 electron each. So if you can imagine here, if we had 2 hydrogens, each one of them having an electron each, that's 4 electrons that we have in total. And each one of these oxygens has 8 electrons. In total, we're going to have 20 electrons in amongst that water molecule, okay? So it's just coming from the bond. It's coming from where the electrons are located on the clouds or the rings. So we do have electrons there in abundance. So they're not just magically appearing out of thin air. When water is split, we do have our hydrogens, we do have our oxygens, but just remember there as well, we do have our electrons that exist on the rings there for hydrogen and oxygen as well. But in total, we actually have 20 of them over 2 water molecules, but we're actually just carrying across 4 of them, okay? So just to recap there, we have 2 H2O molecules. That's going to be split up into our 4 hydrogens, okay, our 4 protons, 4 H+. We're going to have O2, which is oxygen gas, and we're going to have some electrons there as well, okay? So that's water being split. Now, the products of water are split, so the electrons are going to be transferred to the chlorophyll, okay? So all of those electrons, E-, are going to go to the chlorophyll. The protons are going to head over to a proton pool, okay? So they're just going to chill out further away. They're going to be in a proton pool full of H+, and they're going to be used later on, okay? So our proton pool is just where all of the protons are going to go. Some of this oxygen that's being produced, again, remember one of the products of photosynthesis is that oxygen is going to be produced. Some of that at this point could actually leave the leaf out through the stomata. Some of it might be moved on and used in respiration, okay? So some of it might pass out at this stage, but just bear in mind at this point that the electrons are going to be transferred to the chlorophyll and the protons are heading over to the proton pool, okay? Oxygen we're not going to worry about for too much longer. It's the electrons and the protons. Okay, so remember, in the chlorophyll, back a couple of minutes ago, we have our light energy is going to be absorbed. If those electrons from water being split or after being passed to the chlorophyll, the light is going to give them loads and loads of energy. So they already had some energy, but they're going to get even more energy now from the light. So them electrons are going to become high energy electrons. Okay, so we started off with the light being absorbed in the chlorophyll. Water is after being split. All of the products are going to go to one location or another. Electrons, they're coming to the chlorophyll so that they can get more light energy to get even more energy to become high energy electrons. And once we have those high energy electrons, they're going to join once again with the protons from the proton pool, and they're also going to be combined with carbon dioxide as well to form glucose. Now, how does this make sense? Well, carbon dioxide, remember, just in simple form is CO2. The electrons are E-, the protons are H+. So the electrons are going to be responsible for combining all the C molecules, all the O molecules, and all the H all together so that we can form C6H12O6. Okay, so it's the electrons that are going to be responsible for combining all of that together to get our CO2 and our H's to form our glucose C6H12O6. Okay, so that's the overview of photosynthesis in really simple steps. We're going to look at it in more detail now over the next couple of minutes, but just keep those simple steps at the back of your mind as we're looking at it in more detail, because it all boils back to the exact same thing. Water is going to be trapped by the chlorophyll. Water is split into H+, into O2 and into electrons. Okay, those products are going to move to different locations. The electrons are going to the chlorophyll to get more light energy to be high energized so that they can form the glucose. Oxygen is going to leave the leaf so that we can breathe that in. And then we're going to have our H+, our protons, are going to go chill out in the proton pool, and then they're going to come back for this glucose formation where the CO2 can combine with it by using the electrons. So we're going to look at photosynthesis in more detail now, and we're going to look at it in terms of a 2-stage process. We have our light stage and we have our dark stage. The reason it's called the light stage is because it's dependent on light. The reason it's called the dark stage is because it's independent of light. It doesn't need light to happen. The light stage needs light for it to happen. So energy is provided by sunlight. Okay, so the sunlight that's trapped by the chlorophyll is going to provide the energy for the light stage. Reactions happen really, really quickly because there's so much energy coming from the light, so no need for enzymes there. Okay, it's getting loads of energy from the sun, no enzymes are needed. The dark stage, on the other hand, though, it doesn't have as much energy coming from the sunlight, probably has no energy coming in there from the sunlight at all, so it's going to need energy provided by ATP, and we'll come to ATP in a couple of minutes. It's a high energy molecule. And reactions are going to be controlled by enzymes there as well, okay? Because we don't have that energy coming from the sunlight, we need the reactions to be controlled by something else, and it's going to be enzymes in this case. So the light stage, we've already seen ins and outs of this briefly in the, I suppose, the simplified version of the steps earlier on. But again, the light stage, it's going to take place in the chloroplast. More specifically, inside the chloroplast, it's going to take place in the thylakoid membrane of the granum. So if we have a look at the chloroplast over here, if we were to cut it up and look on the inside, the granum are these structures here. Okay, it looks like a stack of CDs placed on top of each other. The thylakoid membranes, thylakoids are towards the outside, so it's going to be on the membranes of those that this takes place. So it operates on the three headings. We have our light absorption, okay, so the sunlight is going to be absorbed by the chlorophyll. The light energy is going to be transferred to wherever it's needed. And then these electrons are going to flow around one of two pathways, okay? Think back to the high energy electrons we had a couple of minutes ago. They have to flow along a pathway. It's either going to be pathway 1 or pathway 2, and we look at the ins and outs of them in the next couple of minutes. So this is very similar to what we seen a couple of minutes ago. Stage 1, sunlight has to be absorbed, okay? So light is absorbed by a range of pigments in the chloroplast, and this allows as much light to be absorbed as possible, okay? The chlorophyll is going to absorb this light inside the chloroplast. Now, this light energy is going to be transferred to the electrons. So there's going to be some electrons inside the chlorophyll. Some more electrons, after water is split, is going to move into the chlorophyll. And these electrons are going to gather this light energy. They're going to become high energy electrons, and these energized electrons are going to be passed on to an electron acceptor. Okay, so these electrons, once they're full of their energy, they're going to follow one of two paths. And we're going to look at these paths now in the next couple of minutes. Now, the first pathway is known as the cyclic electron transport chain. The reason it's known as the cyclic chain is because it's like a cycle. It happens again and again and again. Now, before we get into the ins and outs of this, I'm going to introduce you to two types of molecules. We're going to have ATP and we're going to have ADP. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. ADP is adenosine diphosphate. The only difference between ATP and ADP is adenosine diphosphate, so it has 2 phosphates. Adenosine triphosphate has 3 phosphates. ATP is a high energy molecule, whereas ADP is a low energy molecule. It can become high energy if we add an additional phosphate to it, okay? So if we had ADP and added an additional phosphate to it, we would get ATP, so it would be high energy then. So back to the cyclic electron transport chain. These high energy electrons, they're after moving into the chlorophyll, they've got some sunlight, they're now energized electrons, they're high energy electrons, they're going to move through a series of electron acceptors. They're going to go from electron acceptor to electron acceptor and then move back to the chlorophyll molecule, okay? They start off in the chlorophyll, they go to acceptor, from acceptor to acceptor, back to the chlorophyll. Now, as they travel through the acceptors, they're going to lose energy. And this energy is in the form of ADP. It's a low energy molecule, but they're going to lose some energy, okay? This is used to combine with one more phosphate molecule to form ATP and also some water. And this is a high energy molecule. So as these energized electrons are moving around and around and around, they're losing some energy. This energy is ADP, but this ADP is going to find another phosphate so that they can join to that to form ATP, and it's also going to form some water as well, okay? And as we said, ATP is high energy. So the cyclic electron transport chain, electrons are moving from acceptor to acceptor. They're losing some ADP, they're losing some low energy, but that low energy is going to join with a phosphate to produce ATP, which is high energy. So this is just pathway 1 summarized in diagram form. So we have our light energy is going to be absorbed by the chlorophyll. These electrons are going to move from acceptor to acceptor. They're going to move around and around and around. And ADP is going to join to P to form ATP, which is a high energy molecule, okay? High energy, and also some water is going to be formed in there as well. So it's cyclic, it's happening again and again and again. So there's an abundance of ATP being formed there. Now, pathway 2, this is a non-cyclic electron transport chain. So it's non-cyclic, it's not a cycle, it has a starting point, it has an end point. So the electrons do move from acceptor to acceptor again, but they don't return to the chlorophyll. That's why it's non-cyclic. So we're going to have a different molecule here. As an electron moves from acceptor to acceptor, it is passed to NADP+. Okay, this causes NADP+ to become neutral. Now, how does that make sense? Well, if you can imagine here, we have our plus sign here on NADP+, we have our negative sign here on the electron. If you have something negative going to something positive, it's going to be neutralized. Okay, so once one electron is joined in there, it's going to become neutral. Okay, if it was to receive another electron, this part here is neutral because this electron has made the positive thing neutral. If we take one more electron, it's actually going to become negative. Okay, so the NADP molecule receives another electron and this becomes NADP-. Okay, so it's negative. Now think of this, opposites attract. Is there anything positive that's existing out there that could potentially be attracted to this thing that's negative? And there is. It's the protons that exist in the proton pool because they were H+. Okay, so the NADP- is going to be attracted to the H+, opposites attract, and it's going to form NADPH. Okay, because remember, when water was broken up, we had the H+, we had our O2s, and we had our electrons. Those H+, those protons that were chilling out in the proton pool, are going to come in here and join to NADP-. Okay, this is the non-cyclic electron transport chain. It goes from acceptor to acceptor, and as it does that, an electron is going to move to NADP+ to make it neutral. It's going to take another electron to make it NADP-, and NADP- then is going to join to the H+ to form NADPH, and that's neutral. Okay, the positive and the negative is going to be neutral. Now let's look at the products which we formed so far. So if we look at the first pathway, the cyclic electron transport chain, we had electrons, high energy electrons were passed from acceptor to acceptor. ADP and P were joined together to form ATP. Okay, it's a high energy molecule that's going to be used in the dark stage because remember, there's no light in the dark stage, so we need our energy from another source. So that ATP is going to be sent over to the dark stage to provide energy so that photosynthesis can still happen. In the second pathway, we had our non-cyclic electron transport chain. We had NADP+ joined to an electron to form NADP neutral, and then another electron was formed there to form NADP-. Once we had that NADP-, a H+ came in here because opposites attract, and we formed NADPH. Okay, that's going to supply some protons and electrons for the dark stage. How does that make sense? Well, have a look here. We've loads of electrons after coming in here. We have our proton there as well as after coming in. That's going to provide the protons and electrons for the dark stage. And we also had some oxygen there as well. Okay, so this was formed in very small amounts there, but it can actually be released from the cell at this point, or it can go on to be used in respiration. So we've looked at the light stage. The light stage had two distinct pathways, pathway 1, pathway 2. We now have ATP formed, we have NADPH formed, and we have some oxygen is after being formed there as well. Remember, the dark stage is independent of light. There is no light in the dark stage, so we need it to be controlled by ATP and some enzymes. Now we also have other molecules coming in here as well. So the ATP, which is the energy which is after being formed in the light stage, is going to come in to provide energy for the dark stage. We do also have this NADPH existing as well. Okay, that's coming into the dark stage as well, so that we can have our electrons and our H+, which we might need to form our glucose. Because if you notice already, we haven't mentioned glucose yet. We haven't mentioned that food has been produced. And if we bring this back to the simplified steps that we had earlier on, we need some glucose to be formed because this is the plant's food source. Okay, so we need those for that. Now remember, the aim of photosynthesis is to produce glucose. It's the plant's food source. We've had other products formed in the light stage, ATP, oxygen, NADPH. We've not formed any glucose yet. This is going to happen in the dark stage. So ATP is going to be transported to the dark stage from the light stage, and it's going to be broken down to release some energy. So ATP is going to be broken down into ADP and P, and then energy is going to be released because that high energy molecule is after being broken down. The energy has to go somewhere, so it's going to be released. And that energy is going to be used to make the glucose. Now, at the same time, CO2 is going to enter into the stomata, okay, the tiny holes on the underside of the leaf, and it's going to combine with the hydrogens, so H pluses, and the electrons to form some glucose. Now, these are going to come from the conversion of NADPH to NADP plus. Okay, how is this happening? Well, if you remember back in the light stage, we had an NADP positive was going to combine with an electron to form NADP neutral, and then it was going to combine with another electron to form NADP minus. Okay, if we then think opposites attract, NADP minus, which is this bit here, it's going to be attracted to the positive, H plus, the proton, to form NADPH. So we're going to work backwards here. That NADPH, which consists of all of these here, can be broken down into NADP plus, 2 electrons, and a proton there as well. Okay, so the CO2 is going to come in, it's going to combine with the H plus, which has after been released when the NADPH is broken down, and the electrons as well, which are going to be used to combine it all together. And all of that combined is going to form our glucose. Okay, so CO2 is going to come in, it's going to combine here, which we can see with the NADPH, or the products from that. So the NADP plus is going to go back to the light stage so that NADPH can be formed again. And then our energy, which is after been broken down, ATP going to ADP and P, all of that is going to combine together to form our glucose. Okay, so once again, CO2 is entering into the leaf. It's going to combine with the H pluses and the electrons, which are after being formed because the NADPH is after being broken down, and we're going to form our glucose, okay, which is exactly what we wanted as part of photosynthesis. So just a quick summary then of the light stage and the dark stage. In the light stage, we have 2 pathways. We have our cyclic electron transport, and we have our non-cyclic. The cyclic one is a cycle. We start in the chlorophyll, we go back to the chlorophyll. So the electrons are going to go from acceptor to acceptor, and in the process, ADP and P is going to join to form ATP. Okay, it's going to be a highly energized molecule. We're also going to have NADPH is going to be formed, because if you think about it, NADP positive is going to join with 1 electron to neutralize it to be NADP neutral, going to join with another electron to form NADP negative, and that NADP negative is going to be attracted to something that's positive, which is our H pluses, our protons, to form NADPH. Okay, so products of the light stage, we're going to have our ATP, our NADPH, and we're also going to have some oxygen released there as well, which we can then breathe in. Now, once we get over to the dark stage, okay, we're going to have glucose is going to be formed here. How is that happening? Well, CO2 is going to move into the plant through the stomata, through the tiny holes on the underside of the leaf. And if you think about it, we want to form glucose, which is C6H12O6. Okay, we have C's and O's here, we need our H's. Where are they coming from? Well, the NADPH here, we can break that down into its individual components. So how did we get to NADPH in the first place? Well, we had to add in 2 electrons and we had to add in a hydrogen. So when we break NADPH down, we're going to release those electrons. We're going to release that H plus. So that H plus can combine with the CO2. The electrons can jump in there as well and help out with that. And that CO2 mixed in with the electrons and the H pluses, the protons, is going to form our C6H12O6, which is our glucose. Okay, so the NADP plus is going to be then reformed. That's what was used over here in the light stage to produce NADPH. So that can return back over to the light stage. So the same process can happen again and again and again. The ATP is going to be broken down as well to the ATP and P. So that can return back over to the light stage and can once again be formed back into ATP, which is going to form or supply all of the energy for the dark stage because there's no light there to control those reactions. So we're going to have a look at a couple of exam questions then to try and piece all of that together. So it's a question that comes up pretty much every year. And the question that we have here is photosynthesis occurs in 2 stages. We have the light dependent stage and the light independent stage, and 2 structures found in plant cells are shown below. In which of the 2 structures, A or B, does photosynthesis take place? Well, the 2 structures that we have here, that's a mitochondria, that's a chloroplast, and we know that it's going to be in structure B. So don't name the structure, you just have to say A or B. So important we just write the letter B there for that. 2, give a balanced chemical equation to summarize the process of photosynthesis. Again, we're not going to go into the ins and outs of explaining how to balance it, but we do know now that it's 6CO2 plus 6H2O, that's 2 of the 4 requirements, Sunlight is going to be absorbed by chlorophyll to form the food source, which is glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen is going to be produced there as well, so plus 6O2. Now, name 2 products of the light-dependent stage. So there is 3. I'm actually going to write down all 3, but on the day of the exam, we'll just write 2. So we can say here that we have ATP, we have NADPH, and we do have oxygen there as well. Okay, so all of those are going to be produced. So we have part 4 then as well. Some of the products of the light-dependent stage are used in the light-independent stage or the dark stage. Outline the events of the light-independent stage. So I'm actually going to do this up at the top just so we have a little bit more space. So a couple of things that we can say here. This will be a 3, 6, 9, 12. This will be a 9-mark question. So we're just going to make sure that we have enough marks for each one. So that was 3, 3 plus 3, 3 plus 3, and this is 3 plus 3 plus 3. Okay, so some things that happen in the light independent stage. So we have our NADPH is converted or broken down releasing electrons and protons. Okay, so that could be 1 point there. We have that ATP is broken down to ADP and P. CO2 enters the leaf and combines with the electrons and the H pluses to form glucose. Okay, so we probably had 4 or 5 points there in the end. Write down as much as you know about that and you'll pick up your marks. Okay, so CO2 entering the leaf, it's going to combine with the electrons and the H pluses, the protons, but where do they come from? It's from NADPH being broken down. And we also have some energy being used up there as well. So ATP is broken down to ADP and P. Why are we using ATP? Well, it's the dark stage. We don't have any sunlight to supply the energy, so it has to come from another source. Okay, so that's one exam question. We have another one here. In which cell organelle does photosynthesis take place? So this is very similar to the one that we seen there a couple of minutes ago. So that's going to be the chloroplast. I'll try to fit the answers in beside each question here this time. So that's the chloroplast. Name the pigment essential for photosynthesis. So that's the dye. We have our chlorophyll. And describe one way in which horticulturists can increase plant yields in greenhouses. Okay, so one way this is we can heat it to an optimum temperature. We can supply more light. So you can use artificial light. You could supply more CO2. You could use a range of different lights so that it's the pigments inside or all of the different pigments are absorbing as much or a wider range of light as possible. Loads of different options that you can do for that. Okay, so we're going to supply more CO2 is the one I'll write down there. The process of photosynthesis occurs over 2 stages as shown below. Study the diagram carefully and answer the questions that follow. So we have our light dependent stage over here, our dark stage over here. So water is split during stage 1 using the energy and light. What name is given to this process? So that's photolysis. Identify molecule X, which is produced as a byproduct of the splitting of water. That's going to be our oxygen gas. Okay, how do we know that it's oxygen and not NADPH or ATP? Well, we know that the 3 products that are formed in the light stage are NADPH, oxygen and ATP. ATP is already accounted for here, and this actually will be NADPH, which might be a subsequent question in a couple of minutes ago. So the only one that's left for molecule X there is going to be oxygen. Here's actually the molecule Y here now. So identify molecule Y. So that's going to be NADPH. Okay, so NADPH, how is that forming? Well, NADP plus, which we have here, is going to combine with one electron to neutralize it, another electron to make it negative, and then the positive H plus is going to come in and be attracted to that, so they're going to bond together. Describe how molecule Y is produced. So I'm actually pretty much after answering that there as well. I'll do this up here towards the side, just so we have more room. So NADPH or NADP plus combines with the electron to neutralize it, combines with another electron to form NADP negative, a H plus joins with NADP negative, sorry, that should have been a P up there, NADP negative to form NADPH. Okay, so that's that one there. Name stage 2 shown in the diagram up there. So that's the dark stage, or you can say the light independent stage. What does ATP stand for? That's adenosine triphosphate. We've seen that a couple of times. What is the role of ATP in stage 2 of photosynthesis as shown in the diagram above? So that's to release energy, okay, release energy so that we have enough energy for glucose to be formed because there's no light coming in, so it's the ATP that provides the energy. And identify molecule Z at the end of the end product of stage 2. So again, why do we do photosynthesis? It's to produce glucose. Okay, so we can write down the word glucose there. You could write down the formula as well, but I put down the name unless it asks for the chemical formula. So another exam question there. Okay, so that's the process of photosynthesis, the simplified version and the more detailed steps there as well. And we've seen a couple of exam questions then that we can use to test our knowledge base off of that. Now, before we finish up the session today, I just want to give you a quick overview of our ExamRevision website and all of the resources which are available to you on that as well. Now, when you click into the website and log in, you'll see here that we have a range of different subjects, not just biology. So we've Leaving Cert biology, we've business, chemistry, economics, English, French, geography, history, Irish, maths for higher level and ordinary level, and music and physics there as well. Now, it doesn't matter which subject you click into, they're all going to be laid out the exact same way. So if we have a look here, we can see that we've video tutorials, we've quizzes, we've presentations, we've an exam builder, and we've a resource pack there as well, which is full of H1 notes. So if we click into the video tutorials, we're going to have a look and see if we can get videos for photosynthesis, which is the topic we looked at today. So we go to Unit 2, it's in 2.2, which is cell metabolism, and we can see there that we have a video on photosynthesis. So we click into that, and when you press play, the video talking you through everything you need to know about photosynthesis will start to play. Okay, so it might just take a minute or two there to load up, but we can see there it is. Now, once you've watched the video, if you want to test yourself and see if you know everything there is to know about photosynthesis, we can click on that. And we can see here, what are the products of photosynthesis? So we have glucose and oxygen. What are the reactants of photosynthesis? So what do we actually need it for it to happen? So we have carbon dioxide and water. Colour is chlorophyll. We can click through and we can see here, it's an MCQ based on everything we need to know about the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but once you get to the end, you submit it and you get your score, in this case, out of 8. And any questions that you might have got incorrect, you can go back and try again and again. Now, once we go back here, that was our quizzes. Further down, we also have some presentations there as well. So you can click into that and you'll have a full PowerPoint presentation based on everything you need to know about photosynthesis itself. So we can flick through that. Okay, and you might recognize some of those slides from earlier on in the video. Now, once you're finished with the presentations, we do also have a resource pack there as well, full of H1 notes. So it's all of the information around photosynthesis, briefly summarized to the points that you need to know. Okay, so you can have a flick down through that and you'll see that everything you need to know is there as well. Now, once you're happy with the notes, we can go back here, and the last feature we're going to have a look at today is our exam builder. So we're going to go to build your exam. You can choose any subject and any topic. So we're going to choose photosynthesis here. And we can see this is already set into Unit 2.2, so it's going to be mixed in with enzymes and respiration there as well. But any questions there that you like on photosynthesis, you can add to your exam. So there's one of them there. That's the plus button there. And right back up here at the top, we have the option to download the questions and download the answers. So every single question which has appeared on the state exams, as well as the mock exams, are available there to you to add to your exam. So this is the same for every subject which we have on our platform. We also do have some revision courses run throughout the year. So these are normally done throughout the midterm breaks. We've just held our first ones there for the October midterm break. We'll have more in February, we'll have more over Easter, and some in the end of May, start of June in the lead up to exams as well. So if you have missed them up until this point, there is an option actually to buy the courses which have already taken place. They're all recorded, so you can watch back on the recordings from previous sessions, so you can get them. And there is also more information there about the plans and pricings available to sign up to the website as well. So if you go to the website, there is an option there for a free trial. You can sign up, test it out, see if you like it. And if you do, there is some monthly plans or monthly subscriptions there for you to choose from as well. And the more subjects that you sign up to, the cheaper it's going to be for you. So thanks a million for joining us today. Keep an eye out on all our social media channels. So we have a number of Saturday sessions every week. We've one for junior cycle, one for leaving cert. We've had a number of biology ones already this year. You can watch back on them on our YouTube channel. So make sure and subscribe so you can see which ones are going to be popping up over the next couple of weeks. We will plan to have a couple more biology ones there for you to watch as well. So thanks a million for joining today, and I will see you all again soon.